Hey, hello, how are you? And welcome to my channel. Happy August. I personally feel like this is the last month of summer. I know that fall doesn't technically start until like later in September, but to me, September 1st, it's basically Halloween. So here we are. We have arrived to the last month of summer, and I feel like I did a pretty good job, if I don't say so myself, with my reading goals in July. If you watched my Q2 wrap up in the second quarter of the year, which is comprised of April, May, and June, I read 5 books in those 3 months, and that's really not ideal. That's a pretty low amount for me, but I feel like I got back in the swing of things in July, and I actually ended up finishing 5 books in July. And today I wanted to give you my thoughts, give you my reviews on those 5 books. I feel like I read a couple bangers and I'm really happy about that, so I want to tell you about them. So here we go. The first book that I finished in July is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This is the first book in the Friend Zone series, and this was the first Abby Jimenez book that I've ever read, which is honestly crazy. I have been an avid romance reader for probably the last 5 years now, and it's crazy that I have obviously heard of her books pop up everywhere. I've watched so many reviews of her books, and I myself had never read one. Now I have. I pulled this book in my June TBR, and I did largely read it in June, but I didn't finish it until the beginning of July. In this book, we have our main characters, Kristen and Josh. Josh is very much just kind of smitten and flirty with Kristen from the beginning, and Kristen is just like, no, absolutely not. This is not gonna work out. And also, she already has a boyfriend when the book starts. Her boyfriend is in the service, he's on leave. Josh is a veteran. He is also a firefighter. I don't vibe with that to begin with. I am not a huge fan of the US military. I am not a fan of people that make that their whole personality. And then I feel like a lot of times, this is just a stereotype, a lot of people will come out of the service and then go into law enforcement. They will become a firefighter, something like that. And so I just felt like that was like a really heavy theme, which to me reads as like a right-leaning theme, and that's not my vibe, obviously. So that was something that I was kind of like ew about in the beginning of the book. Also, not to be a hater, but Kristen is really obsessed with her dog, and she runs a business where she makes like furniture and clothes for dogs, and I'm not a dog person, and I know that if you are a dog person, that's probably a plus, because I'm a huge cat person, and whenever there are big cat themes in a book, I'm like immediately like, okay, you know. So obviously that's personal preference. If you like dogs, good for you, that's fine. I don't hate dogs, I'm just a cat person. So also, trigger warning, a lot of this book centers around infertility, and I know that's a subject that can be really triggering for a lot of people. I really didn't love that there was also this theme of a woman's worth is tied to her fertility. I do not agree with that, and I think that obviously towards the end of the book, the characters are getting to the point where they don't agree with that either, but that's just something that is a heavy theme. It's a heavy undertone, and I really don't like that the male main character is like super obsessed with having a bunch of kids and having them be biologically his. Like, Kristen straight up asks Josh, like, what about adopting? And he's like, nah, I prefer to do it the old-fashioned way. And I'm like, ew, like, no. And also, adoption is such a noble cause. So many children need to be adopted into good homes to people that want kids. I literally feel like I just talked about this when I was talking about Sweet Thing by Renee Carlino. I don't like it. So I gave it 3 stars. I was really thinking about giving it 2 stars, but there is something big that happens near the end of the book that I accidentally spoiled for myself, which really sucked, because I was like, okay, I know that this is an interconnected standalone series. So I was like, who is the second book about? And in going to read who the second book is about, like the first sentence of the synopsis of the second book on on Goodreads completely spoiled the end of the first book for me. So don't do that. But because I knew that was gonna happen, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's like a really big twist. I'm so sorry, I know I'm being so vague. I don't think that dramatic of a twist needed to happen, but I do think that because something so serious does end up happening in the last quarter of the book, it does bring a lot more like reality and growth to these characters. So that is ultimately what bumped it up to a 3-star for me, and it did make me want to read the second book because I was just like, where are we going from here? You know what I mean? And I do own the second book on Kindle, so I probably will be reading that soon. But yeah, 3 stars for The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. After that, I read Sandwich by Catherine Newman, and this is a new favorite. This is one of those books that I could see myself returning to next summer. This is such a summer read. It's such a beautiful book. Like, I feel like the prose is not necessarily like lyrical, but it did remind me of like some poetry that I've read, and I really enjoyed that. This is a book about Rocky. She is a mom in her mid-40s. She's got 2 kids that are adults, and her family are going to visit the beach. They're going to Cape Cod. They do this every summer. They have been doing this for like 20 years or whatever. They always stay at the same place. So you get this sense of like tradition and nostalgia that just feels really comforting. And you're in her head the whole time, and you're really watching her grapple with her kids being grown up and her getting older herself. You are hearing her thoughts about her parents getting older. There is a lot of talk about menopause and how she's dealing with that physically and mentally. And then she also has anxiety and insomnia, and you get to learn what she is reading about and scrolling through in the middle of the night. And it's just so funny because it's so random, but it's so relatable to, I think, any woman of any age. Like, if you can't sleep and you get on your phone and then you think of something random and then you go on WebMD and you're all of a sudden like spiraling about some disease that you probably don't have. I just thought that it was so relatable and so funny. Even though I'm obviously not a mom in her mid-40s, I really enjoyed this book, and I can't really say how because I don't want to give anything away. Obviously, I do not do spoilers on this channel, but they also talk about abortion, and I really liked how they broached that subject. I think that it really grounds a subject that feels like such a hot button topic, unfortunately, a lot of the time, and it just brings it into like somebody's real life and how something like that can affect somebody and just what that choice can really mean and how it can affect the rest of your life. I thought it was really interesting, and it's really made me want to read more of her books as soon as possible. After that, I read The Restoration of Celia Fairchild. This book I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It just didn't give me that 5-star feel, but I really enjoyed it. I thought that this story was really complex. It's not a romance, but it does have some romantic elements towards the end of the book. We are following Celia. She is an author. She has been writing this very popular like newspaper column for a long time. It's one of those columns where you write in and you have a question, you need advice, and then she'll answer you. And that's just been her life for a really long time. And then all of a sudden she finds herself divorced and without a job, and she has to move back home to the Carolinas to restore this great big house that her family used to live in. And she's also at a point in her life where she's really desiring to become a mom. So she's trying to adopt a baby We've got a lot of really sweet side characters. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I really enjoy a small town with like very vibrant side characters. I think it's so fun to kind of have like an ensemble cast, and we definitely have that in this book, which was really fun. I will say there are these two brothers that she interacts with a lot. One of them is her contractor while she's working on restoring her house, and then the other one, he's a lawyer, and she kind of like befriends both of them. But the way that they're described, I kind of just was picturing the Property Brothers in my head, and I think that that's really funny because I didn't intentionally think of that. My brain was just like, this is the Property Brothers, and I was like, okay, so I thought I would tell you that so that if you choose to read this book, you also will think that Trey and Lorne are the Property Brothers. You're welcome. But I would suggest this book. I really liked it, and it made me want to read other stuff by this author. And then I read Wreck by Catherine Newman. This book is the sequel to Sandwich, and this one is very autumnal. Obviously, you can tell by the cover it's autumnal, so it would have been cool to like wait and read it in the fall, but I was just so excited to read more of her stuff that I was like, I need to read it now. I actually ended up reading this book in a day. If you want to watch the vlog where I read it, that is up on my channel. I can link it below. But this one was a 5-star too. It's so good. It's so good. We're back with Rocky, and I believe it's 2 years later. We're seeing how a couple of things have changed in her family's life, and you get a lot more in depth about her physical well-being. There's like some health stuff that comes up for her, and then also I feel like it really dives into the anxiety a lot more than the like menopause aspect that Sandwich had. Again, we get those like middle of the night Google searches, and that's hilarious. But I feel like if you have anxiety, if you read this book, you'll feel so seen. Like the author has to have anxiety, because otherwise how could you know exactly what it's like to be in the head of somebody that's that anxious all the time? And like, trust me, I get it. I am medicated for anxiety every day, and I just feel like whenever I read a book that has a very realistic character with anxiety, it just makes me feel so seen, and I love that feeling so much. So I don't have enough good things to say about these two books. I really like Catherine Newman, and I know that she obviously doesn't need to keep writing stuff about this character, but I love Rocky. I love her family. I feel like I'm a part of their family, you know what I mean? And honestly, I could see myself reading Wreck again too. And then last but not least, I read Summer in the City by Alex Astor. This was kind of a random pick. I had heard Sarah Caroli talk about this book, and so I was like, I'll give it a try. When I went to go look it up, I didn't realize that I believe this is the only contemporary romance that Alex Astor has written. She normally writes like romantasy, so I thought that was interesting. We have our main characters Elle and Parker, and Elle is a screenwriter, but she writes under an alias, so she's not universally known. Even though her movies are very popular, she can just go about the city and nobody knows who she is. And she ends up meeting Parker, who is a tech billionaire. And I didn't know that going into this. I'm not a fan of billionaires. I'm not. And so even though as a character, Parker is really sweet. Also, this is fake dating, by the way, which is a fun trope. I'm grossed out by billionaires. There's nothing that he can do for her that's like so sweet that will win me over. You know what I mean? Like, and he does so many things for her that are so sweet and like so amazing. And I feel like so many people would be like, well, if you had that kind of money, wouldn't you be doing that too? And I feel like I liked Elle as a character, but I don't fuck with billionaire romances, and I didn't realize that's what this was gonna be. So I gave it 3 stars because I don't think it was a bad book. I don't think it was poorly written or anything. I just feel like it wasn't for me. I just feel like maybe I should have done more research before I read the book. And also, it takes place in New York City, and disclaimer, I have never been to New York City. However, I was just talking about this with my wife recently. I feel like, especially with romance, for some reason, so many of these books take place in LA or New York, and like that's it. And so I really liked that the restoration of Celia Fairchild takes place in North Carolina. That's so fun. To be fair, it does start in New York City, which is funny. But I'm just at a point where I'm really like hungering for books that are not all just set in New York or LA. Like, not everybody lives in New York or LA. I currently live in Oregon. I want to read a book about somebody that's living in Oregon. And I'm from Northern California. I want to read a book that takes place in Northern California or just somewhere in California that's not LA. I have read a couple books that take place in San Francisco or like in Summer in the City. Parker does normally live in San Francisco, but of course he also has a huge mansion level apartment in New York, and he has a house in Paris and whatever. And so I'm just like, that's not interesting to me. That's not what I want. I just want some variety. So if you have book recommendations that take place, especially in Northern California, I would love to read a romance or just a fiction that takes place in places that I've been to. I feel like that's so fun. It's just so fun to see a fictional story that takes place in your world where you live. Like, these are places that you've been to. I feel like that sounds amazing. So if you got recs, hit me up. But yeah, those are all the things that I read in July. I feel like overall it was a pretty good reading month. I became really obsessed with Catherine Newman, and I finally read an Abby Jimenez. I am excited to read the next book in the Friend Zone series, and I'm excited to see how many books I can read in August. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked this video, you can like it. If you like me and my channel and you haven't already, you can hit subscribe. I talk about books and beauty on this channel. All of my social media links are in the description below, and I will see you next time. Bye!